Everyone, it's nice to have you all in on this cold Monday in Ottawa. J'ouvre maintenant la séance. Bienvenue à la réunion numéro.
Welcome to meeting number 24 of the Public Affairs.
Pursuant to the standing orders, members are attending in person. I don't think anyone is attending remotely, but that, of course, is always an option. I'd like to remind participants of the following points. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. All comments should be just through the chair. Although to clarify, that does not. I don't look for witnesses to have me name them. I like a little bit of back and forth between members and witnesses as they offer their answers to questions. Conformément à l'article 108.3G du règlement.
Pursuant to Article 1083G of the Standing Order, the committee continues the study of the 2024 and 2025 public accounts of the Government of Canada sent to the committee on December 17th, 2024.
Our witnesses, and I understand we have opening remarks from two of the three. From the Office of the Auditor General, Karen Hogan, Auditor General of Canada, and you'll have an opening statement right in a few minutes. Ms. Garda, pardon me, nice to see you again, and Mr. Matt, Principal, nice to see you as well. From the Treasury Board Secretariat, Annie Boudreau, Controller General of Canada, you'll have an opening statement as well right after Ms. Hogan. Blair Kennedy, Executive Director, Government Accounting Policy and Reporting, and John Daly, Senior Director, Public Accounts and Advisory Services. Thank you all for coming in today. And then lastly, Department of Finance, Nick Leswick, Deputy Minister, nice to see you, along with Evelyn Dancy, Assistant Deputy Minister, Economic, Fiscal, and Intergovernmental Policy Branch. So without further ado, you'll each have approximately 5 minutes. Ms. Hogan, the floor is yours.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about our consolidated audit financial statements of the Government of Canada for fiscal years 2023, 2024, and 2024, 2025. I would first like to acknowledge that this hearing is taking place on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. I'm joined today by Sana Garda, Senior Director, and Etienne Matt, Senior Director from the Financial Audit Practice. The government's financial statements are one of the key accountability documents. Our audit of these financial statements is one of the largest audits conducted by my office, and at some point, it requires the participation of almost all of our financial auditors. The conclusions and findings that result from this audit help Parliament oversee public spending, promote transparency, and encourage sound financial management. Our auditor's report on the consolidated financial statements of the Government of Canada begins on page 63 of Volume 1 of the French version of the Public Accounts of Canada for 2025 and on page 59 of the English version. Similarly, our auditor's report is found on page 61 of Volume 1 of the French version of the Public Accounts of Canada and on page 57 of the English version. We have expressed an unqualified opinion on the government's consolidated financial statements for both fiscal years. An unqualified opinion indicates that the information in the financial statements is fairly represented and is presented in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. In other words, you can rely on the information presented in the financial statements for both fiscal years.
Parliamentarians, I am happy that our office has provided for the last 10 years an annual commentary derived from our financial audit work. This report highlights important matters we want to bring to Parliament's attention from all of our federal financial audits, including our audit of the government's consolidated financial statements. For example, in both the 2024 and 2025 commentaries, we reported on ongoing problems with pay administration and deficiencies in IT general controls over some key government systems, such as those that process payments. Our latest commentary draws attention to significant transactions and raises new concerns with National Defense's process for recording operating expenses. This is in addition to the issues we have been reporting for years relating to National Defense's management of inventory and asset-pooled items. As spending by National Defense is expected to increase over the next several years, it is important to strengthen internal controls to improve the accuracy and reliability of information used to support budget management and decision-making. Also, in our 2025 commentary, we noted that 77% of Crown corporations did not have their corporate plans approved before the start of their fiscal year. This is similar to the rate reported in the 2024 commentary. Delayed approvals can cause operational inefficiencies, project delays, or additional costs. In 2025, we also noted that 80% of Crown corporations experienced delays in the appointment of members to their boards of directors. This type of delay affects a board's ability to fulfill its important governance role. In closing, Mr. Chair, I would like to thank the senior officials and staff of the many departments and agencies and Crown corporations involved in our audit of the government's financial statements. We appreciate their ongoing collaboration. This concludes my opening remarks. We'd be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Et on vous remercie, Madame Hogan. Suivant.
Thank you, Ms. Hogan. Next, Ms. Boudreau for around 5 minutes, please.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chair,
opportunity to discuss the 2024 and 2025 Public Accounts of Canada. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather today is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. I have with me today Blair Kennedy, Executive Director of Government Accounting Policy and Reporting, and John Daly, Senior Director, Public Accounts and Advisory Services. Monsieur le Président, le gouvernement s'engage.
the government is committed to being open, transparent, and accountable to Canadians and parliamentarians. To that end, public accounts are part of a series of reports that outline how the government spent the money it requested from Parliament and how it generated revenues. Public accounts include government's audited consolidated financial statements and other detailed financial information for fiscal year ending March 31st.
Were spent. They provide information to parliamentarians to enable them to understand and evaluate the financial position and transactions of the government and carry out effective oversight. The requirement for the production of the Public Accounts of Canada is set out in the Financial Administration Act. Deputy heads and chief financial officers are responsible for the accuracy of the information provided and are required to follow Government of Canada accounting policies, which are based upon the public sector accounting standards. The production and finalization of public accounts is a joint responsibility. En tant que contrôleur général, l'une de mes responsabilités.
As Controller General, one of my responsibilities is to provide leadership for financial management within the Government of Canada. As such, my office provides government-wide leadership on accounting standards and the preparation of departmental financial statements, including the public accounts. The Department of Finance is responsible for the financial statement discussion and analysis section, which provides an understanding of the variance from the budget. The Receiver General compiles the data received from departments, agencies, and Crown corporations and publishes the public accounts. And finally, the Office of the Auditor General audits the consolidated financial statements found in the public account.
For 27 consecutive years, the Auditor General has provided a clean or unmodified audit opinion on the government's annual consolidated financial statements. This is a positive reflection of the high quality of the government's financial reporting and the work of my colleagues across the public service. Monsieur le Président, j'aimerais aussi aborder la question du moment.
Mr. Chair, I would also like to address the timing of the tabling of the public accounts. The Financial Administration Act requires public accounts to be tabled each year by December 31st while Parliament is sitting. Even though the end date is set by legislation, the actual tabling date will vary from year to year within the time frame. As noted in the OAG commentary on the 2024-2025 financial audits, Improvements to the timeliness of the tabling of public accounts reflects the government's continued efforts to improve the usefulness, the quality, and the presentation of public accounts.
Just to continue examining the 2024 public accounts while studying the 2025, I would like to provide a few highlights for both years. In fiscal year 24-25, the government posted an annual operating deficit of $36.3 billion compared to a deficit of $61.9 billion in fiscal year 23-24. With respect to government revenues in fiscal year 24-25, they increased to $511 billion from $459 billion in fiscal year 23-24 due to an increase in personal and corporate income tax and other revenues. De plus, au cours de l'exercice 24-25,
In fiscal year 2024-2025, federal expenses totaled $547.3 billion. Of this amount, $359.4 billion, or around two-thirds of it, was for transfer payments. It is around the same for the previous fiscal year.
Marks would be more than happy to answer all your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now begin our first round of questions, which will consist of 3 members, 6 minutes each. Mr. McCauley, you'll lead off first, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, A.G. Hogan and everyone else for the commentary. I want to start, Madam Beaujeu, who writes the copy of the public accounts? By the copy, I mean almost the editorial and the explanation. Not the numbers, but who writes out copy?
Thank you for the question. Are you talking about the financial statement discussion and analysis?
Volume 1,
FSDNA?
Volume 2, Volume 3. I can pick something at random. Transfer payment, a transfer money from a government, et cetera, et cetera. Who is writing that? The reason I ask is, if I'm looking at it, the public accounts, and I appreciate it's received a clean audit, but if I'm reading at it, it looks like there are Liberal government talking points in the public accounts. I don't believe these should be in the public accounts. I'll give you an example. Page 8, Section 1. The government is moving toward a new capital budgeting approach that distinguishes its day-to-day operational spending from expenditures that stimulates public and private sector capital formation. Like, these are talking points right out of the Prime Minister's office, and this is for after this year's public accounts. So it doesn't affect the 2024-2025 public accounts. So why are Liberal talking points put in last year's public accounts, and who wrote it and who approved it?
Thank you for the question. I mean, the financial statement discussion analysis is a product of the Department of Finance. So we try to find an appropriate balance between representing
Okay, let me stop you right there, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
These changes that have been widely discredited, I think, by the PBO and others, are for the current fiscal year, not the previous year. So why are Liberal talking points in last year's public accounts, which are supposed to be nonpartisan, public accounting signed off by the AG, why is it in last year's public accounts?
Thank you for the
And
question.
I'll be blunt here. Is it appropriate? And A.G. Hogan, do you think it's appropriate?
Well, perhaps I'll start and then I'll let
Just briefly, 'cause I
Mr.
don't have a lot of
Leswick go.
time.
The audit opinion, which starts on page 59 in the English version of the 2025 public accounts, covers the financial statements which follow. When it comes to the financial statement discussion and analysis, we don't opine on that. We are associated with it, so we make sure that it's not misleading. But part of the responsibility of a government in that document, the financial statement discussion and analysis, is to talk about the future and to talk about risks and how they're managed.
Do you think it's appropriate, Mr. Leswick, these specific comments?
I certainly take your point, sir.
Stimulating public and private sector capital formation?
It was trying to provide some sort of, as Ms. Hogan said, directional framing for...
Page 9, Section 1, it continues, elimination of the consumer carbon tax on the fuel products further contributed to lower inflation, which of course was denied for years by the government. But again, this is for discussion of the 2025-2026, it was eliminated. Didn't affect the inflation issue in 2024-2025 that the public accounts covers. Again, it looks to me that it was added in as a PR stunt to promote the current government, because it has nothing to do with the 2024-2025 year.
So do you want me to respond?
Yeah, like, am I wrong here? Like, I haven't seen this in past public accounts. I've never seen previous public accounts where it's commenting on future inflation being changed because of.
Yeah, I certainly take your point, and we'll be very mindful of that going forward.
Okay. The carbon, I want to get back to, again, the carbon tax. It talks about the providing small and medium-sized companies their money back. How much is still there to be paid out? Because it had been promised for years it would be paid out. The public accounts comments on the huge majority of it being paid out, but then it talks further about it's going to be paid out over years. So when will it be paid out? Do you know?
That's a good question. I don't have the remaining balance available to me, but we can follow up with you directly or with the committee with that answer.
Okay. I want to talk about the liabilities portion. When it talks about contingent liabilities, it's jumped from $2 trillion to $3 trillion. And I realize what contingent means. Madam Beaudreau or Mr. Leswick, like what has changed that there's a $1 trillion jump in our contingent liabilities? Is that the ruling around Richmond with the land claim there, or?
Thank you for the question. I don't think we have a $1 trillion increases in contingent liabilities. What I remember, it is going from $56 billion to $54 billion, but there is no $1 trillion increase in contingent liabilities.
I'll find the exact thing.
Okay.
I think it's jumped from, when it talks about contingent, like possible, there's, based on the potential risk of the payout. Mm-hmm. It's in there. I'll find it exactly for you. And I actually only have 13 seconds left, so I'll have it, the page number, when we come back.
Thank you, Mr. McCauley. Going now to Mr. Osborne. You have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to ask the Office of the Auditor General, based on the, and thank you for your work, by the way. I know that overseeing your 250 employees, as you mentioned, I think in your talking points, most of those would have been involved at some point in overseeing the public accounts. It's a monumental task. And you did indicate it was presented fairly, clean accounting, and following accepted accounting principles and standards. So I guess not only a compliment to you, but a compliment to the staff at the Department of Finance, because it's also, on such a huge budget, a monumental task to undertake that. And I think it's 27 or 28 consecutive years that your office has overseen with a clean record. But the question that I was looking to ask, separating the capital investment in future budgets to focus on operational spending versus capital spending. Your thoughts on that?
So thank you. We do have 250 financial auditors who work on crowns and departments and agencies, and as I say, at some point in time they touch the public accounts work. But we have so many others across our office. But the complement for the public accounts goes to public servants. We do not prepare the financial statements. We just come in and see whether they've been fairly presented and the accounting's right. So I think it rests with Department of Finance, the Comptroller Generals, and the countless public servants who, on a day-to-day basis, try to maintain accurate financial records. So when it comes to the capital budgeting, and I have nothing to do with the budget, so my office doesn't opine on the budget. We're not involved in it. We're not consulted on the budget. The presentation is one that the government has chosen. For me, what will be important is that the financial statements continue to follow public sector accounting principles. So we will opine against that, and in order to maintain a clean opinion, the statements will need to be presented in accordance with those standards. The definition of a capital expenditure for the budget deviates a little from those standards. So as long as the statements then present it fairly, I think it'll be fine. In my view, this could create confusion. However, for a reader who is trying to crosswalk from the budget promises and commitments to the actuals which show up in the financial statements. So I have had many conversations with the Department of Finance and the Comptroller General's office about making it clear going forward, and that you can use the financial statement discussion and analysis to do that, but to not create additional confusion with a reader and a user of the statements.
Perfect. I appreciate that. The separating operational from capital, provided it is clear, would not negatively impact how your office would oversee the public accounts.
As I said, it will depend on how those capital expenditures are presented. In the financial statements, only expenditures that result in assets for the Government of Canada, federal assets, should be shown as a capital expenditure. In this case, transfer payments to a province where the province might be using it for a capital investment or an infrastructure build, in the budget would be seen as a capital expenditure, but would be shown as an operating expenditure in the financial statements because transfer payments of a federal government are operating. And that's why I say it could create some confusion, and it'll be important to be clear. The statements need to be prepared in accordance with public sector accounting standards in order to try to maintain that clean opinion.
Okay. With Canada having one of the lowest net debt to GDP ratios in the G7 and one of the smallest deficit to GDP ratios in the G7, how does Canada compare to other G7 countries and the OECD peers in terms of our fiscal capacity? And I guess I will ask the Department of Finance this, in your opinion, how do we compare with other G7 countries in terms of our fiscal capacity, our ability to borrow? I would think that based on what I've read and from my experience, Canada is seen as one of the more trusted countries. The oversight of the Office of the Auditor General, the Comptroller General, and the fact that for decades the finances of the country have been presented fairly and accurately.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for the question. Well, we enjoy a strong AAA credit rating at the federal level. We have a very sound fiscal framework. We have a low net debt to GDP ratio, so we compare very favorably to other advanced economies and AAA credits. So we're mindful of that as we move forward in terms of how we advise the government in deploying new spending measures, and it's fundamental to how we advise the government.
I noticed the current PBO and a former PBO, there was some discrepancy between some of their opinions. I did ask in the OGO committee last week, mighty OGO, yeah, the difference in investment shown by officials in the Department of Finance and what the current parliamentary budget officer had looked at. He had admitted he did not take into account the fact that interprovincial trade barriers were coming down, or there were other international trade deals and so on, which would create a more competitive environment and allow for greater investment, in my opinion, by those who are tendering on projects in Canada. Having been a finance minister in a province for 3 years, politicians don't do the analysis. That's done by finance staff. And I have come to have great respect for the analysis done by finance staff. Can you talk about the chart and the difference between what the Parliamentary Budget Officer put forward in terms of $1 trillion in investment and what your officials had put forward?
Perhaps we can follow up. When you say the chart that the PBO put forward and the $1 trillion,
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm following exactly.
He had estimated, I think, just under 800 billion versus the trillion put forward by your officials.
Yeah, perhaps we can follow up with the committee in writing, just in terms of the decomposition of the $1 trillion, so that it's clear. And you can do
Thank you very much.
comparison and
That's your
contrast
time,
with
Mr.
the
Osborne. Suivant, c'est Monsieur Lemire, s'il vous plaît, pour 6 minutes.
Mr. Lemire, 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. This is a very important exercise. I'd like to start with Treasury Board. Based on TBS data, there are over 8,000 senior managers in the public service. 7,900 of them received bonuses totaling over $140 million. So around $18,000 per person. I hope that those who manage the benefits delivery part are part of that 2%, but who knows? Is it indecent in the case where there are job cuts because senior management was not able to properly manage the budget? And if 98% of them have a bonus, it's not a bonus. It's almost something that the employer must give.
Merci pour la question. En fait, la rémunération.
Thank you. When it comes to executive compensation, including the performance bonus, takes into account many criteria. For example, accomplishing projects for Canadians, but also how they manage things, how they manage their work unit, or diversity and inclusion targets within the public service. I am not the one managing that program in Treasury Board, but what I can tell you is what I just said. Thank you. So in the 2024 budget, an additional $2.9 billion was granted to the Benefit Modernization Program. What is the current cost of that program, and how are you tracking those expenditures? How is it that a project that was initially earmarked for $1.76 billion now costs $6.6 billion? Thank you. Based on my understanding, that $6.6 billion is the total amount of money that will be spent by the year 2030-2031. It will not just be the OAS project that will be included. It will also be the CPP that will be included, as well as EI. Benefits programs for the most vulnerable people will be part of that project. There are still many elements that need to be taken into account, and it will be one of the most modernized systems in the entire government. I also want to say that OS payments exceed $84 billion per year. So that's a lot of checks sent to people. And we need to make sure that systems are reliable, 100% reliable, so that payments can go out every month. Thank you. In the answer that we have just received at this committee, the government said that the Canada Pension Plan is not included in the estimates of the benefits payment program because they do not have a spending authority yet. So essentially, there's a third element that has not been budgeted yet. Can you confirm that you received a request related to that? And have you and what else have you done? Based on what I know, I have not received any requests related to the gap that you have just identified. Can you provide to the committee all documents given by ESDC to the Treasury Board related to the Benefits Modernization Program, as well as documents related to budget increases, as well as explanations why cost increases were accepted by the department? If you can provide an oral or a written response. I will look at the available information communicated to us, and then we will send it to committee. Okay, next question. Any of you can answer. I want to talk about the Emergency Benefits Fund for Canadian businesses. Around $0.8 billion are awaited to be reimbursed. And Export Development Canada does not want to identify non-eligible beneficiaries. This means that there may be higher losses. So how is it that that finance does not tell EDC to do that work? Why are you telling ESDC and the CRA to ask for non-eligible people to reimburse that money, but not EDC? I think that we need to come back to you with the answers, because it's not me nor my deputy minister who is responsible for that program. But based on what I understand, all public servants involved in that program are doing follow-ups as required by the criteria of the program and also associated laws. We get back to you on that. I want to go back on the $1.9 billion that were removed from the public servants' retirement accounts, because there's a surplus. However, under Stephen Harper, there was a deficit. So why not improve retirements? And what will they do? What will you do with the contributions of the public servant pensions? So that $1.9 billion was for fiscal year 2024 and has been reimbursed, has been provided to the Treasury Board while we await discussions with the government. Thank you. Second turn, starting with Mr. Deltel. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome to our committee, and thank you for all your work for Canadian public accounts, whether that is the Auditor General, the Department of Finance, or Treasury Board. People who listen to us also need to manage a budget, their personal budgets. And no one can make it through the end of the month if they always rely on their credit card. Yet this is what's happening in Canada. We saw that over the past 10 years, the debt has doubled. And this year, the deficit exceeded what was planned last year under the previous Prime Minister. One day, we will have to pay. Right now, people are listening to us. Every penny paid for the sales tax does not generate any real revenue. It's only there to pay the national debt. And now, there has just been an increase of the deficit by $80 billion. $80 billion, much higher than what was forecast. What is the cost of $80 billion on public finances for people who are listening to us, the public?
Cost of $80 billion, an effective interest rate of 3% annually. I can't do the mental math in my head. I feel like failing the committee, but I mean, there's obviously an uptick in public debt charges associated with that increased borrowing. I'll just leave it at that without embarrassing myself.
I don't find it very funny, when we know that our grandchildren will have to pay for that.
Sorry, sir, I wasn't trying to make a joke. I was trying to make a joke of my mental math.
But, as long as we cannot control our deficit and our debt, our children, our grandchildren, and those who are not born yet, will have to pay for that. That's enough. Dois-je rappeler, Monsieur le Président, que...
Should I remind you, Mr. Chair, that in the 90s, the Liberals, with the Minister of Finance, Paul Martin, was able to balance the budget. 10 years ago, Prime Minister Harper tabled a balanced budget. Look at the painting of Prime Minister Harper. In his hand, there was a balanced budget. I hope that he will not be the last Prime Minister with a balanced budget. So, I will repeat my question. When you're always living with your credit card, when you're only paying the interests on the debt with the GST, we are heading off a cliff, don't you think?
I would just support the sentiment that we need to be very mindful of Canada's federal credit rating. We need to keep deficits in check. And that in that context, the government has put forward 2 fiscal anchors in its most previous budget, supporting a declining deficit to GDP ratio and an operating balance by 28-29 fiscal year.
Madame Hogan, concernant la défense nationale,
Ms. Hogan, about national defense, and we'll soon see it in the numbers. You said that national defense underestimated its expenses by around $846 million. We understand that that's a lot of money, and that national defense has a big budget, but $846 million, that's still senseless. What kind of message does that send to other departments? Does that mean that they can get away with these huge expenses? So just to clarify, they did not lose track of $846 million. It was how they do their accounting of expenditures that worries us. These are expenditures related to the next fiscal year. But they did not do good accounting, and that concerns me. Because the first time that you receive an invoice, you need to make sure everything is correct and not necessarily rely on a second review. And that's why we want them to better manage their books, as we expect their expenditures to increase. It's not that this is lost money. It's just money that was badly accounted for. So that's what I mean by they lost track of it. It's not that they lost, it's just that they did bad accounting. And in closing, that worries me. Because if you discover this within national defense, this means that this may happen in other departments at one point. It's very hard to do all the accounting. Thank you. Ms. Yip?
Okay. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Hogan, and to your entire very, very large team of producing the public accounts. That's a lot of work. In your opening statements, you mentioned that both in the 2024 and 2025 commentaries that there were ongoing problems with pay administration and deficiencies in the IT general controls over some key government systems, such as process payments. What were the problems?
So there's 2 angles there. So when it comes to pay for individuals that work in the public service, as you recall, when there was a transformation of the HR to pay systems and Phoenix was put into place, there was many pay issues. Some of those pay issues remain. What we highlight here is that it isn't about Phoenix itself not calculating people's salary, but that a significant portion of the errors that we continue to find are data entry errors or delays in actually entering things, for example, promotions or acting pays and so on. So that's about fixing the processes even before things are entered into an IT system. So that would be the first issue, and that's rather ongoing. And I think the big concern is as the government's moving towards modernizing pay and changing the Phoenix pay system, you have to fix all of these errors before you put them into a new system, because bad data in will result in still errors in people's pay. So it's important to fix all of that before a new system is put into place. The second has to then do with the IT issues. Thank you. So this is a new issue that we found in the last couple of years. And why it's important is that you want to properly manage control to important IT systems in the public service. We found that there were many users that had access to systems that they did not need in order to carry out their functions. While we were able to do work to make sure they didn't do anything that they shouldn't have done, so perhaps changing numbers in error, it is still a risk, and it does create inefficiencies for our audit and for the government. This is where we need shared services to really start working on some of the recommendations that we've given them to improve IT general computer controls, especially when they provide lots of services to the broader public service. So it's something we're going to keep monitoring, because in the vein of being more efficient in delivering audits, we need to be able to rely on IT computer controls to have a faster and more effective audit.
Has this impacted your work?
Well, it's impacted in our work in that it creates more work for us to do. So when there's a weakness and a user, a super user, who can do many things, conflicting roles in the financial system, we need to carry out procedures to make sure they haven't done that, so that we can still rely on the information in the systems. So it does create inefficiencies for us, but it also, I think, would provide more assurance to departments and agencies if the IT general computer controls had all of these weaknesses fixed. And that's why we continue to work closely with Shared Services Canada to work on those.
Ms. Bordeaux, do you have any comments on this?
Yes, I do. So first, I want to thank the AG. As it has been mentioned in her commentary on page 27, I think in the English version, the OAG did not find any appropriate changes made to data or any data breaches because of the inappropriate access. Having said that, we are working very closely with Shared Services Canada. We do know that they do have an action plan, that they're going to be monitoring that action plan. And in addition, they requested from their internal audit shop to do an audit on privilege access management, internal audit. And that audit will focus on privilege access management, and we're going to be receiving a copy. That audit will also made public, and we're going to be following up again if we're finding any different discrepancies. Thank you.
Ms. Hogan, do you find that adequate enough?
I think it's a step in the right direction. Absolutely. The best ultimate fix is to better manage and control access to IT systems, especially important systems like the standard payment system that generates all payments that the Government of Canada issues. So while that's good to identify weaknesses, the ultimate goal is to just fix all of these IT weaknesses and eliminate them.
Thank you, Ms. Yip. That is your time. Suivant, c'est Monsieur Lemire, 2 minutes 30.
Mr. Lemire, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So everyone who knows their history well knows that the Great Partnership did not start at the Plains of Abrahams, but rather the Union Act, when the British wanted the French to pay their debts. Everyone knows this history. Of course, public accounts makes us think about that chapter, because when you realize that debt servicing has increased by $6.1 million compared to the previous fiscal year, this means that the Liberal government doubled debt interest payments. It's 1/3 of the Quebec government's budget. It's probably one of the best arguments for why Quebec should separate, because the federal debt is so heavy. However, what is the revenue received from the GST? So when you go to a store and you buy something, the answer is around $50 billion. So every time a consumer pays the GST, they pay to service the interest of the debt. Does that mean that we have lost control?
I'm sorry, I don't know if I understand the question. Does that mean we've lost control? I don't know.
Est-ce qu'on a perdu le contrôle avec...
Have we lost control of public finances with debt interest payments? Because when Canadians pay the GST, they are no longer paying you for state revenue. They are really just paying the equivalent of the debt servicing due to the mismanagement of the Liberals over the past 10 years.
I'll just give you a brief and straightforward answer. We're still a AAA credit at the federal level, and we're very mindful of carefully managing our fiscal framework.
Merci. Les comptes publics...
Thank you. The 2025 public accounts show that personnel expenditure has increased by $2.3 billion to $19 billion. You talked about how it's important to improve the integrity of the public service, yet staff expenditure increased from $67 billion to $76 billion. How can you expand the fact that there's almost more expenditures for professional services and for staff, while services to people have not improved?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you. I'd like to debunk something about professional services. It's something that we often are asked about at committee. $23 billion of professional services include 14 categories. One of the most important is engineering. A lot of it goes to national defense and to DFO. Another part is provided to renovating buildings, for example, the La Chaudière building or Parliament. These are all specialists. And the public service does not have the kind of people to provide those kinds of services. Another kind of service for professional services are nurses that we send to the north to provide healthcare services. I think it's very important to understand that there are 14 categories and to not necessarily amalgamate everything together. With that being said, staff costs will increase because of higher salaries for public servants and for the related benefits and pensions. Thank you, Mr. Lemire. Next.
You have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. To start with, Ms. Boudreau, following up on my colleague, Mr. McCauley here, you had talked about provisions in being $54 billion, but what he was getting at is on page 42, section 1, it says as of March 31st, 2025, the government exposure is over $3 trillion, whereas in 2020 to 2024, it was $2 trillion. So that's where he was going at, so you can prepare for that. I don't need that question at this point, or the answer to that question at this point. You prepare for hearing. Can I go? I'll start with the Auditor General. In your opening comments, you talked about the budget approvals were delayed. Can you determine the reason why and who was responsible for those delays, whether it was necessarily the government's finance versus departments, to where, just trying to get down to who's responsible for the delays and where that, and whether you were able to determine that in your audit?
I'm sorry, I think those remarks were made by the Controller General and not the Auditor General, but
Okay.
you would have to ask Ms. Boudreau.
Oh, oh, okay. I thought that was your end, but go ahead, Ms. Boudreau, then.
Okay, thank you. So if we talk about, if you are referring to Public Accounts 2024, the tabling of Public Accounts 2024 was made last year in December of 2024. So it was late for.
I'm thinking that it was.
I think I understand now. Are you talking about delays in
The
approvals
budget
of
approvals.
corporate plans for
For
crown
the plan.
corporations?
Correct.
Okay. I was thinking about the federal budget, so my apologies.
Yeah, no.
I mean, we highlighted the fact that a crown corporation, which is really supposed to operate at arm's length from the government and has its own board of directors, however, is required to prepare a corporate plan for the government to approve. Delays in those corporate plans can cause issues, especially if you need to if you want to change the way you operate or if you need to borrow. They are all submitted to a minister, and then the ministers have to get approval through cabinet. And so we've just been highlighting that for years, many are not approved before the year end starts, and there are some that still wait years to be approved. So the reasons for those delays would have to be explained by someone from the government.
Okay, so you're probably not going to be able to answer the next question with that answer. And my next part is just extrapolating on that. Do you think it's the structure that is resulting, or is it just the actual, because the actual people in the departments that are doing it that are on that problem? Because you've said in the past that they don't necessarily have to change rules if they just followed rules. So I'm just wondering if it's following the structure or actually just doing it.
I think that that's actually a difficult question to answer because it could be because of the structure. It could be the volume of corporate plans that are coming through and the timing at which they come through. But it could also be about the content of them, right? If we used, for example, Canada Post corporate plan hadn't been approved for many years, so they were operating under an older corporate plan, and they were still running recurring losses. They had liquidity issues, and the government was going back and forth with them on the options being presented in the corporate plan. So I think at times it will depend on the content. At times it will depend on the system. So it's a hard question to answer.
Then you probably won't be able to answer the next part of it too. But just going down that road, did you see any evidence or plans that the budgets would be approved on a more timely basis going in the future? Do you see anything that they're actually addressing to fix that problem?
So it's been a few years that we've been highlighting this, and I would tell you over the last couple of years it's remained about the same with the delays and those approved late or not at all. So again, that's why I say the cycle that they're in or the reasons the delays are something I can't.
Not being addressed.
I can't answer yet.
Yes. Okay. All right. For Mr. Leswick, I don't have much time, but you just mentioned in your comments about they had fiscal anchors that were set. Can you describe to me how they've, I don't know, you're probably not going to have enough time here, but it seems to me those fiscal anchors have been moved a lot, and whether or not they're going to actually remain or be addressed as staying in the same place going forward.
Well, the government has stated its two fiscal anchors as being a downward deficit GDP ratio and operating balance within the context of its capital budgeting framework by 28-29. So that's the focus. That's the mission.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Up next is Mr. McKinnon. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm interested in this fiscal anchor of operational budget by 28-29. This was certainly spoken to by Mr. Macaulay and Mr. Osborne. I believe, Ms. Boudreau, you indicated that that we needed some changes to the way accounting is done, and I believe Ms. Hogan mentioned that there are certain difficulties in terms of capital expenditures and tracking them properly. So in real life, I'm not an accountant, I'm a computer programmer, so if you could speak to a computer programmer and tell him how the kind of changes we need and how are we going to track our progress towards this fiscal anchor as we go forward. And I'll open that to whomever feels they can answer that.
The accounting changes, and I think the answer will be very short and sweet. No accounting changes. Public accounts will remain based on the public sector accounting standard, and that will be the way that we're going to be reporting on, the same way that we have reported for years and years ago. So that will not change, and that's, I think, what Ms. Hogan said exactly also at the beginning. She was going to be auditing the public sector accounting standard, and that's no bearing operating versus capital. So maybe now I can turn over to my colleagues at Finance.
Sure. Thank you. So I'm happy to provide a bit of background and maybe in plainer language about the capital budgeting framework that the government proceeded with in this Budget 25. As has been made, I think, quite clear, the government has indicated it has no intention of changing the basis of its financial reporting, which is the Public Accounts of Canada. It's also the Department of Finance's monthly fiscal monitor. Those financial statements are prepared on the basis of public sector accounting standards that are set by independent public bodies in our country. Those financial statements in the public accounts are audited by an independent auditor general. What the government did this fall, culminating in its first presentation in the budget, is we assisted, the Department of Finance assisted the government's development of a capital budgeting framework in which the government is now able to more closely understand and shift the composition of its spending towards investments intended to help grow the economy. And so really this is more of an economic framework. It's a decision-making framework to support Cabinet, the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance. And it is different from the government's financial statements and its public financial reporting. That's the reason why the capital budgeting framework does have certain definitional differences. It's because the government is trying to make decisions that have different impacts in the economy. And to do that, we have to be able to talk, for example, about transfer payments to other levels of government that are used for infrastructure. Those are investments intended to grow the economy, increase productivity, raise the standard of living of Canadians. And kind of a financial reporting framework doesn't allow the government to really weigh and assess the relative value of those kind of investments. That's what the capital budgeting framework is for. It's more of an economic and decision-making framework.
So are we going to be able to see in the accounts, a line item that says this is what our operational budget is? It's plus or minus, whatever?
So certainly in the government's budgetary publications, so the spring update and budget, we would be producing financial displays focused on the government's, as the deputy said, focused on the government's fiscal anchors, including that intention to ensure that the day-to-day operational expenditures are covered by revenues by 28-29. You will see that type of information in their own discrete tables, not interspersed with tables that the public is used to seeing on a public accounts or accounting standards basis. So there will be specific tracking. The baselines were published in Budget 25. The calculation of this operating balance, the baseline of capital investments, the incremental amount of capital investments made in the budget, et cetera. All of that is available in Budget 25, Annex 2 in particular, and we would anticipate continuing with those standard displays so that we can track our success relative, to our mission for the economy, and we track that in the capital budget. We report our financial outcomes on a public accounts basis, and indeed in the public accounts.
Great, thank you.
And that is your time, Mr. McKinnon. Thank you very much. Beginning our third round now, Mr. Macaulay, you have the floor again for 5 minutes.
Thanks. Ms. Boudreau, just quickly to the issue of the $3 trillion. It says as of March 1st, the exposure, and I apologize, the exposure is over $3 trillion. So just quickly, why the jump from $2 trillion to $3 trillion for our exposure? Briefly.
Briefly, so I can tell you what's included in the $3 trillion. It's mainly the insurance programs at CDIC, the Canada Development Insurance Corporation, as well as EDC. It accounts for about 2.2. So when I look at 2025, we have a little over $3 trillion, and when I look at 2024, I don't have that calculation of what makes up that amount in front of me, but I can provide that.
Wonderful. Mr. Leswick, I just want to go back to you, please. IMF's Article 4 consultation for Canada states clarifying the role of debt to GDP, not debt to deficit, but debt to GDP ratio as a primary anchor would strengthen discipline, transparency, and credibility. The government's moved away from debt to GDP. IMF says we need to return to that as an anchor. Is that something that you believe we should do?
Well, certainly I think debt sustainability is paramount importance, but it's for the government to decide what fiscal anchor will steer its fiscal policy.
So the government's using a political decision on debt to or deficit to GDP instead of what's best for the country, perhaps, as suggested by the IMF. The IMF also states we should provide clarity around the use of the capital versus operating expenses, which the government's not provided. Is that a weakness, perhaps, in our, transparency and accountability?
Listen, I take, a lot of things the IMF says with a grain of salt. Debt sustainability is important. The government has every opportunity to select its own fiscal anchors. So I'll leave it at that. But we obviously take the Article 4 advice seriously, and we stop there.
I want to get back to one of my things I always bring up every year, and I'm sure you're ready for it. The net debt to GDP. We always hear the government claim best in the G7, and we brought up before several years ago with yourself. It includes the assets from the CPP and the Quebec pension plan. I noticed in this year's public accounts, first time I've seen it, where it states that such should not generally be considered part of it because you can't access it for reasons without permission from the provinces. Do you still think it's valid for the government to include CPP and QPP as part of its net, or is it its claims of lowest deficit to GDP in the G7?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I do, but only for the basis of international comparisons. That's the kicker in my view, is because if you want to compare net debt GDP ratios across advanced economies, it's almost impossible without these types of modifications. For example, many other advanced economies take their social security.
No, I understand that. So you think it's just. I'm going to go back to your quote from 3 years ago, because I understand the target of my criticism, because you have to ask yourself whether the assets of the CPP would be available to the government to use in a time of distress. And then you quickly stopped yourself. And we had kind of a laugh, because it's understanding the government can't access that. It would be political suicide. So again, should they be using these untouchable assets in their PR, basically, that we are in great shape? When you take that out and compare it to OECD, I think we're like 22nd best out of 29. And again, it goes back to transparency.
Yeah, I take the point, and I made the point. I agree, like accessing the CPP, QPP accounts in a time of distress would be prohibitive. But for international comparisons, you have to add them back in. Because in other countries, they take social security premiums and they throw it against general revenues. And they just hold the liability in their general accounts. So for international comparability, I support it, but I definitely I emphasize, I agree with you from
I'll go back to your comment from 4 years ago at a previous one to that. I admit there's a lot of gymnastics here to justify the government's use of that. I've only got 15 seconds, so I'll just pass it the next time around. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCauley. Your seconds will add up here. You've left some on the table. So turning now to Mr. Al-Soud, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for having me. I am, of course, not a usual member of this committee, but it is a privilege to be with all of you and the millions watching us on CPAC right now. One fact that stands out in the public accounts year after year is that roughly 66% of total federal spending flows through statutory transfer payments, largely outside direct departmental discretion and outside Parliament's ability to adjust spending line by line through estimates. Madame Boudreau, pour les paiements de transfert...
Ms. Boudreau, when it comes to statutory transfer payments, what is the active role played by departments to ensure that all risk is well managed once it has been approved by government? Thank you for your question. Let's talk about, for example, OAS payments. It totals around $84 billion. It's statutory, so not voted by Parliament through appropriations or through OGO, as mentioned by Mr. McCauley. This payment increases year after year for two reasons. One, more people receive it who are eligible. And two, because of inflation. And if I understand correctly, these transfer payments are the responsibility of the Department of Finance. So I just highlighted the two main reasons of that increase. Thank you.
Question is for Ms. Hogan. From an internal controls perspective, where does the Auditor General see the greatest risk when spending is statutory and high volume, but not revisited annually through estimates?
So I think this is where you're relying on your IT computer controls to make sure that once something's been entered into the system that it's functioning properly. And that's why we raised concerns around access issues linked to IT general computer controls. Many of those statutory payments are low dollar value, high volume, and then there are some where there would be a separate transfer payment agreement. So then it is to make sure that when it's first input into the system that it's input correctly, right? So I think there's two controls, that initial one and then the ongoing IT computer controls. So that's where your greatest risk would lie from an audit perspective.
Thank you, Ms. Hogan. My next question is on outsourcing. The Auditor General has raised concerns related to reliance on professional and special services. In particular, you highlight a need for better procurement governance and justification. In the cases you've examined, how consistently does the government ensure that knowledge and capability are transferred back to public service when consultants are used?
So because you narrowed it to what I've examined, I can't speak generally, but I can speak to some of the issues that we've seen for sure. And we highlighted that during some big IT programs that we've looked at, that there isn't a concerted effort to ensure that the skills that the government went out to seek because they didn't have them internally get transferred over, so the competencies get transferred over. So it is something that departments should work on. But I do caution the need to not create more rules when it comes to procurement, but to enforce the current rules. That to me is a value added, right? You're going out to either fill capacity because you need surge capacity, or you have a skill you don't need. Then in order to not create long-term dependencies, you need to figure out a way to transfer those skills into the public service.
This is, of course, not a uniquely Canadian issue. Comparable governments face similar patterns. Are you aware of steps taken by other Westminster-style governments, the UK, Australia, to reduce reliance on consultants? And do those reforms align with concerns you've raised in Canada?
I'm not sure I could tell you that I've had those conversations with my counterparts in those countries. I do know that we all spend a great deal of time looking at procurement rules and making sure that processes are fair and transparent. But I'd have to look more in depth. It's not something that I think I came prepared to answer. And if I do find something, I can let the committee know.
That would be very much appreciated. In the last 30 seconds that I have, it's clear that asset values, amortization schedules, and useful life assumptions rely heavily on management judgment. From your perspective, which asset classes or department represent the highest audit risk in terms of valuation and amortization?
I'm sorry, represent the highest what?
The highest audit risk.
Oh, well, I think it would probably look at IT systems in progress, so work in progress, right? Making sure that you're capitalizing the right things going forward. In the long run, I think most of the government of Canada's IT systems are used well beyond their estimated useful lives. That doesn't mean that you should go back and correct, but I think it means you should think about it as you install new systems going forward. I think I would highlight finally national defense and their difficulty around how they record certain assets, one being asset pooled items. So, it's unique in each department what some of their concerns might be around capital items, but for the most part, capital items are well managed and well recorded in the financial statements.
Thank you. Do you have any brief follow-up, Mr. Al-Sood, or are you good? Thank you very much. I appreciate your question today. Suivant encore une fois, c'est Monsieur Lemire.
Mr. Lemire, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will make my conservative friends happy. I will talk about the carbon tax. In 2024, Ottawa collected $10.5 billion in carbon tax and gave back $9.8 billion. I'm trying to understand something. In 2025, Ottawa collected $13 billion in carbon tax, but redistributed $15.6 billion. How come?
Avec ce programme.
I think that in the budget, we described this. We said that the same amount will bring a balance after years. To redistribute the amounts, the government decided to use some programs that were not in place at the time of the revenues. So there was a difference between those two amounts. But as it was described in Budget 2025, we think that for 25-26, there will be no revenue from the carbon tax, and all proceeds will be distributed after this year. Yes, I understand that the carbon tax has been abolished. But is it normal to give out the money before we receive the money? Because an additional $2.6 billion was given out. Quebec, of course, of additional money was given out. Now, Quebec was not reimbursed, so Quebec gave out a lot of money. On average, Quebec paid $860 million for an electoral gift to other provinces and territories without receiving anything in return. Is that fair? I think you already have the answer. The government decided to make that final payment for people who live in jurisdictions that have the carbon tariffication system. You still have 30 seconds left. When you wait for the interpretation to finish, I do not count that time. Okay, well, I just want to say that when it comes to public accounts, Quebecers are paying for something that do not benefit them. It is not up to Quebecers to pay for transfers that were not made. And therefore, I think it would have been fair if Quebecers had access to that transfer or that they didn't have to pay for it. Thank you.
Or for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. To, Mr. Leswick and Madame Boudreau. In August 2023, then Treasury Board President Anita Anand announced that the government would be directing departments to find more than $15 billion in saving across departments. Looking through the public accounts, I was very eager to see these savings in action and looking forward to expenditures in departments going down. However, Section 2, Note 6 of the 2024-2025 public accounts indicates that expenditures are up for every ministry except 4. It's similar under the same category in the 2023-2024 public accounts. This leads me today and the government's newly announced comprehensive expenditure review. You're pledging to save billions of dollars, but Canadians haven't even seen results from the last ill-hearted attempt of saving. What measures are currently being taken to ensure department spending is reduced across the board?
Thank you for the question. Indeed, like you mentioned, there was a commitment to reduce spending. At the same time, as we know, the government is also investing in D&D. $9 billion was invested a few months ago. The government is also investing in housing and other commitment. So I don't think you will be able to see a decrease as compared to what was announced in budget because of additional commitment and funding in budget 2025.
Well, I'm sure you're aware, or I should say, Mr. Leswick, did you want to add something, please? My apologies for not giving you the opportunity.
No, thank you. Continue.
Wise choice. I'm sure you're all aware that the Government of Canada is now spending more on debt interest charges than it transfers to provinces in the Canada Health Transfer. How much did the government pay on public debt charges in 2025, please? Mr. Leswick.
Sorry, if you have the number available to you, you can say it out loud. I just need to track it down in the volume.
Sure, it's fine. It's $53.4 billion.
Yep.
Health transfers were $52.1 billion in 2025. So this is a $6 billion increase from 2024. Since the Liberal printing money machine took office in 2015, our public debt charges have gone from $21.8 billion in 2016 to $53.4 billion in 2025. Canadians are lining up at food banks in record numbers. Our youth are facing record unemployment levels, and the cost of housing in this country has doubled since 2015, as Madame Boudreau indicated in the last response. But when we look at our public debt charges, it's no wonder why. And the current Prime Minister is doing nothing but adding fuel to the fire with his $78 billion deficit. Does the Finance Department recognize the strain that's being added to Canadians' financial situations with the current government spending as they are?
we certainly recognize the challenges faced by Canadian households and businesses.
It's very heartfelt. Madame Boudreau, or I should say, pardon me, I should go back to Madame Hogan. You found there were continued errors in public service employees' plans. Can you please elaborate on that?
We found that there were continued errors in pay for public servants. Is that what you're asking about?
Yep, that's right. Continued errors in public services employees' pay. Pardon me if I misspoke.
Oh, no, that's okay.
Thank you.
We obviously every year we look at salary. Salary is a large expenditure for the government of Canada, and we continued to see that there were errors in pay. What we noticed differently over the last 2 years is that while 29% of the individuals we looked at still had errors in pay, we're seeing a shift in where those errors are coming from. And as I mentioned previously, about 2/3 of them are due to data entry errors, and then 1/3 is due to delays in when items are entered into the pay system. So this isn't about the Phoenix system making errors, but about everyone who's feeding information needing to improve the timeliness and the controls that they have to make sure that information is accurate.
Concerned that as the government moves away from the Phoenix system, that these outstanding actions will still be an issue?
Absolutely, which is why we highlight sort of the legacy pay action requests and how long some of them have been outstanding. You don't want to transfer information that is wrong into a new system. You'll still have individuals being paid incorrectly. So it's important to clear up all of these pay issues before data is transferred to a new pay system.
Thank you all. Merci beaucoup.
That is your time, Ms. Kuzi. Up next, Mr. Osborne. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I just want to clarify something, I guess, from the last questioner, and that is the action of the Prime Minister and the deficit. The current administration is not even 10 months today in power. I want to tie a couple of things together so that our the viewers, the millions of viewers that are watching CPAC can see what is happening in my opinion. I mean, going from, segregating the operational budget and the capital budget so that we can show taxpayers and the people of the country, bond rating agencies, our investors, that we are lowering operational costs but making generational investments which will strengthen our economy and bring more investment to the country. You tie that with removing interprovincial trade barriers, which should make the economy stronger, spur additional investment, for example. The timing of the budget, which will give greater certainty to parliamentarians, to contractors and others in terms of that timing. Looking at making generational investments and what the road ahead looks like. If Budget 2025 is successful, not only in terms of the international trade negotiations, talks, the agreements that we're making, but the interprovincial trade barriers coming down. Can you talk a little bit, Mr. Leswick, and perhaps as well, Ms. Dancy, on what unlocking these investments and the impacts on Canada's economy and the impacts on future balance sheets will look like? Because these generational investments, tying these three things together that I just mentioned, the timing of the budget, the capital investment versus operational investment, but more importantly, the generational investments that will be made in Canada and the trade movement. Can we talk about what that will look like for future balance sheets?
Well, I think it's important to start, and as we've exchanged with the committee this morning, the government is trying to, as it implements this new capital budgeting framework, trying to demonstrate that components of its new spending initiatives are focused on productivity and growth enhancing initiatives so that they will deliver a dividend for growth in the economy. And that's across a broad range of measures. And that includes tax measures that support, say, for example, research and development. It supports new infrastructure measures. It supports new residential investment, housing measures. In addition, it's taking initiatives to rethink, regulation, to work with provinces to lower interprovincial trade barriers, obviously with the intent of reducing those trade frictions, enhancing productivity, and delivering on growth. Now, ultimately, and let's be frank, we've had a 10, 20-year history of low business investment and poor productivity, and we need to improve on that. Now, to your question, ultimately how that translates into to pinpoint a growth forecast and how that translates into improved fiscal balances is to be determined, but that's definitely the effort and intent of the budget and the government's mission right now.
Ms. Tansey, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yes, thank you. One thing I want to point out, and it speaks to prudence in terms of the budget's fiscal plan, although there is a very strong focus on growing the economy in this budget through the various means the deputy has noted, our budget forecast, our fiscal forecast, is based on the economic outputs from independent private sector forecasters. And so we have not introduced any kind of a dynamic growth into the forecast. What you see here is from the private sector survey, and I think it reflects a prudent, cautious approach that the projections here in the document, they do not seek to build in to our main financial displays the potential benefits for the economy of the measures herein. What we do, what the government must do, is wait to see how the private sector forecasters internalize and react to what they see in the data and what they see from the government, and that would be in future publications.
Thank you. I'm afraid, Mr. Osborne, that is your time. And beginning our fourth round, which will take us to just before the top of the hour, M. Detel pour 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Monsieur le Président, Mr. Detel, 5 minutes. Thank you. Now, I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about is good or bad. I want to talk about the amount of money given to the government that the government then gives to people or to businesses following agreements with third parties to, for example, exonerate them from their debt. What we see is that this year, $7.2 billion was spent for that, whereas last year it was $8.6 billion. How can you explain such a big difference? Can you repeat the numbers? $7.2 billion, and last year, $18.6 billion. So to answer you, it's the CEBA loans, the emergency benefit, the money given to businesses around an average of $60,000 were given per business. If that was all reimbursed within a set period, they received a $20,000 credit on that $60,000, so 1/3. So that is part of the amount that you have just stated, but that was done in 2024. That's why you saw a big amount in 2024 and a smaller amount in 2025. But those were essentially the amount forgiven under CEBA. So in public accounts, we see all these tables with the departments, but we do not have the list of businesses. Now, I know I don't want what some small business received to the amount of $2,000, but I'm looking at big businesses who maybe need to pay taxes after an analysis, but then that tax amount is forgiven. Is that taken into account? If I understand correctly, and if I'm not wrong, everything related to waivers, so it requires an order in council in many cases, so it is public. So you can see the list of businesses that are part of that, and I can give you that in writing. So I talked about some small business owned by one person that owes $2,000. But maybe there are some others that are well known, that are better known, and they owe maybe millions. Are individual cases also public? I can get back to you in writing. It depends on how that debt was forgiven. I believe that there are cases where people disagree and will challenge you. So you will probably also spend a lot of money on that for very little return. Do you assess the risks that you made when you challenge or someone challenges your decision? Let's take the example of the CRA. They have very well established procedures related to debt recovery. And what you have highlighted shows that, yes, it cost a lot of money to get back $10 compared to just forgive it, so that's what they will do. So when the CRA looks at debts, they do that cost-benefit analysis for businesses and for people. So let's say in modest cases, maybe that's different from the large cases. I understand that, but let's say when someone owes millions, if not even $500,000, maybe that should be public. Earlier, we have said that the Prime Minister has been in power for less than a year, but we see that the number of public servants has increased by 33%, and the deficit has increased by 33%, and many other expenditures have increased by 33%. That's not a good start. Thank you, Mr. Deltel.
The floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. This question is directed to Ms. Boudreau and then Mr. Leswick. The government has said that in building the economy, especially with the global economic challenges, that responsible choices will need to be made. Will we see this reflected in the upcoming public accounts, and what measures are currently being taken that can be pointed to reflect progress on these goals?
Thank you for the question. So public accounts will reflect all the funding that has been approved by the government, as well as all the expenses. So obviously, public accounts, it's always a reflection of the past. In order to see what's coming, it's called the main estimates, the budget that all departments will be receiving. And the main estimates have to be tabled before March 1st in Parliament. Donc, again, depending on what is the orientation of the government, priorities, that will be reflected, but from a historical perspective in the public accounts.
Mr. Leswick, any comments?
No, I think that's an accurate depiction of the mechanics. I mean, the government will present an update to its fiscal framework in the spring economic and fiscal statement, and then we'll follow up with a successive budget next fall in accordance with its new budgeting calendar.
Ms. Hogan, in your 2025 commentary, it was noted that 77% of Crown corporations did not have their corporate plans approved before the start of their fiscal year, and it was a similar rate reported in the 2024 commentary. This is in your opening statement, and I just would like to know why. Why is this happening again?
So as I mentioned previously, I'm not exactly sure. We think it's important to highlight that, good budgeting, good budgeting health is that you get your budget approved before your year-end begins. Your year begins, and only 23% of Crown Corporation's corporate plans are approved before the year begins. What's more concerning is those that go years without being approved, and as I mentioned, it could be for many reasons. It could be the timing, the volume, it could be the content. That's something that the government would have to answer in order to provide you more insights, but it's concerning because it has been a trend for a few years, and Crown corporations are meant to operate at arm's length from the government, and the budget and the board of directors play an important role in governance.
Okay. It's also noted that the Crown corporations reporting on climate-related financial risks have increased, and that 48 Crown corporations were asked to report, but 11 have not yet reported this report. Do you know why that is?
Well, when it comes to climate-related financial disclosure, it isn't a mandatory requirement, so it was something that was strongly encouraged, and it was actually a positive thing to see so many Crown corporations participate. Some of those that haven't are really small, that they don't have the capacity within their finance shop right now to do all of this, but there is a lot of activity and momentum in the sustainability sphere when it comes to standards, and eventually it will be something that will be required in Canada. So it's important for every Crown Corp to start building up that expertise and that knowledge and the capacity to do that going forward.
Okay, I'm on a roll with the Crown corporations because this is, after all, public accounts, right? So we want to hold it to account. In 2025, it was noted that 80% of Crown corporations experienced delays in the appointment of members to their boards of directors. And why is that 80%? That's a lot.
So again, our commentary highlights two areas that we have some concerns around Crown Corporation governance, and it stems with the model of a Crown, right? A Crown, as I mentioned, is supposed to be at arm's length from the government, and the board of directors plays an important role in ensuring that financial and investing and operating procedures are well in place, and they exercise that oversight. So when there's a delay in appointments to the boards of directors, that could cause an issue where a Crown may not end up with a quorum anymore to approve these kinds of policies. And so it's important to stay on top of them. Not every Crown Corporation legislation allows a board member to remain after their term. Some they cannot. So this is just a concern with the way Crowns are set up. The government needs to be more proactive in having corporate plans and board members appointed to ensure that that governance mechanism is strong and in place year over year.
Thank you, and that is your time, Ms. Chip, unless you have a short follow-up. No. All right, then, thank you. Encore une fois, Monsieur Lemire, pour environ 2 minutes 30 secondes.
Mr. Lemire, 2.5 minutes, please. Program costs has increased by $23 billion, so around 5%. And then transfer payments increased by $11 billion. However, there was a drop in support for farmers and in cases of catastrophe. We know that our farmers are the first victims of climate change. Over the past few years, our farmers went through hard times. How is it that there is no more further help for farmers?
Thank you for the question.
Merci. Thank you. I was spokesperson for Indigenous people. There is $27 billion in liabilities for specific claims. However, I do not see any amount in the agreement that has around $47 billion. Where's the money? Thank you. So for $47 billion, there's two parts. First, an obligation included in the public accounts 3 years ago, around $23 billion, was paid and is still being paid. You will see the details in the public accounts. As for the difference, it's for the next 10 upcoming years, and they will be accounted for as the expenditures will be spent. Thank you. Now I want to go back to the Benefits Modernization Program. There are IT programs and associated expenditures as indicated by the Auditor General. These programs will bring in important risks. How can you explain that? And how can you explain the fact that large IT projects have seen their costs explode? Thank you. Within Treasury Board, there's the Chief Information Officer. His team reviews large projects. There's a lot of governance to not only monitor the costs, they also see whether the programs will improve efficiency, and they take into account AI. But to answer your question, Treasury Board is heavily involved when it comes to the governance of large IT projects. Thank you. Do you have a little follow-up question? Plenty of other questions. I can keep going on, but I don't want to abuse no one's time. Inaudible. Revenue increased by 11.2% compared to last year based on analyses. When you take into account the increase of the overall revenue compared to the increase of revenue of businesses and the increase of tariffs, and what can we expect for 2026 with tariffs and all the uncertainty? Do we think that revenue will drop, or can we maintain that increase? According to our current forecasts, that was for budget 2025, everything has been described when it comes to business taxes. Of course, we live in a world that is filled with uncertainties. However, we see that there is still resiliency, and the latest numbers are in the budget. Thank you very much.
5 minutes.
Thanks, Chair. Mr. Leswick, when will finance issue like clear definition regarding operating and capital for budgeting? Or does that come from Treasury Board?
No, I mean, Budget 25 predated me in this job, but the Annex 2 in Budget 25 was a detailed annex, which hopefully provides enough substance to the framework.
Okay. Ms. Nancy, I want to go back to some of your comments that you were making, I think, to Mr. Osborne. I'm going to be blunt here. It sounded like you actually worked for PMO with those comments about glorifying all these changes and this and that aren't reflected in the private sector forecasts. I look at the Bank of Canada just reissued their forecast, which came out after the budget, after all these items that you mentioned are going to help growth, and yet the Bank of Canada has not revised its forecast upward. So I just want to leave that with you. I'm not looking for a comment. I'm just expressing my concern, as I did earlier, about the government using public accounts and this meeting as a PR voice for the government. I can't imagine how you could sit here and explain that these changes are going to produce all this growth when the Bank of Canada actually says the opposite. Madam Boudreau, I just want to follow
Mr. McCauley, do you want to give the witness an honest chance? It's fine. I'm just double checking.
Mr. Williamson, thank you. Ms. Boudreau, you commented earlier comment about the cost of contracting, and I respect, you brought some clarity to the $23 billion. A lot is stuff like public service spending on, PSPC spending on roadway and that. But I do want to point out there is a fair amount of waste, and we actually heard in committee the government stated they went to McKinsey and other consultants when they had perfectly qualified public service internally. And while I appreciate your comment, I'm afraid it sounded like you were distracting from the government's propensity to throw money at consultants wastefully. So I just want to bring that up quickly. Madam Hogan, how much is COVID-related write-offs in this year's public accounts? And a follow-up is, I know we've had in public accounts a disagreement between your office and the CRA about the amount of write-offs that should be recovered. I think it was $27 billion. Like, how much of that write-offs and how much are they related to the CRA's refusal, I guess, to follow up on these ineligible COVID payments to corporations and individuals?
I think the exact amount of the write-offs in the year is something that perhaps Ms. Boudreau could provide you. I still remain concerned, as you mentioned, when we did our audit work in, I think it was 2022, when we looked at specific COVID payments. There was a disagreement with our office and the Canada Revenue Agency.
Was it 27 or was it 54? I can't recall.
Back then, I think it was around $16 billion, which was related to businesses. And I think overall, when you put individuals, it was $27 billion in total. But I'm trusting my memory's fine.
Change in the effort from CRA to recover this money for taxpayers.
Our concern at that time was that we did a sample and identified and made an estimate of what we thought was payments made to possibly ineligible recipients. They needed to do the work to determine that. And in order to treat taxpayers fairly, you should look at everyone. You shouldn't just pull a group of returns or individuals or businesses and look at them. And that's where the disagreement stemmed, was the extent of work that was going to be due to identify payments to ineligible individuals and then the process to potentially collect them. We do highlight in the commentary that the allowance for doubtful accounts related to COVID benefits has gone up. And that was something we cautioned back in 2023 with the length of time that goes from when the payment was issued. It increases the risk and the likelihood that you will not identify who shouldn't have received money, or you will have difficulty trying to collect it. And we're seeing that in sort of the provision for doubtful accounts.
What is the provision for it, for the doubtful?
For the specific COVID payments, it's about $10.5 billion this year related to payments. That doesn't include the Canada Emergency Benefit Account.
Right. And if CRA had taken your advice and acted earlier, would we have seen a much lower number?
I mean, that's hard to predict. It would obviously impacted collectability the sooner you go, but it is highly likely that you could predict that it would have made that a smaller number.
Okay. I think that's my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It is your side's turn. Is this a point of order, or are you the? Are you going to?
No point of order.
Yes.
I didn't want to interrupt the previous speaker, but I just want to respectfully remind committee members that the role of bureaucrats and department officials is...
I'll hear it. I'll hear it. We have time. Go ahead.
Yeah, that the role of officials is to provide advice to government and to do it independently, and that we should respect that.
Well, that's Mr. Osborne. That is that I can handle this, Mr. McCauley. That is a subject of debate, and we're here to hear from the witnesses. Your side is permitted to ask all kinds of questions to perhaps clarify that mystery, and the opposition's job is to poke holes in it as best they can. Mr. McKinnon, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, given that Mr. McCauley made some interesting comments outside of his questions, I'm wondering if any of the witnesses would like to respond to any of them. Feel free. No? Yes? Okay. Failing that, I'm going to, I think, talk about, I believe, Ms. Hogan, you mentioned one of the major projects we have with our pay system is that there are a great many pay discrepancies. I'm wondering if these are discrepancies that have lasted over years, or are they occurring on an ongoing basis? I'm wondering what is being done to correct them, particularly in terms of legacy problems, and I guess what sorts of process changes might we recommend to correct the problem going forward?
So we've been following issues with public servants' pay since the transition to the Phoenix pay system back in 2016, I do believe. If you go back and look at previous financial commentaries, we've been tracking error rates in pay since then. I can tell you that it's been as high as about 50% of public servants would have had an issue with their pay. That could have been an overpayment or an underpayment. And this year it resides at about 29%. What's most concerning is when we look after year end, how many of those are actually being corrected, and we're not seeing an improvement in what's being corrected for individuals. That's why we look at the pay action requests. So pay action requests can be anything that a public servant puts in, from I want to move, so please change my address, to there's a problem with my pay. And there's about a quarter of the almost 400,000 pay action requests that are out there that have been outstanding for 3 years or more. And we're really not seeing an improvement in trying to deal with those legacy issues, as you mentioned. All of that needs to be fixed before you move any of those public servants over into a new pay system, or the pay errors will continue. I do want to highlight, however, that we have seen Public Service and Procurement Canada do a lot since 2016, address many of the weaknesses that we identified with Phoenix, which is why in the last couple of years it isn't really Phoenix that is causing the pay issues, but data entry issues or delays in entering changes to pay. So that just speaks to the fact that pay isn't just about a box that calculates it, but it's about the whole HR to pay system and how everyone in departments and agencies need to support Public Service and Procurement Canada to get accurate information in a timely way into the system so that public servants can be properly paid.
Is there anyone out there now who is going back over these legacy problems and correcting them on a systemic basis?
Well, Public Service and Procurement Canada does have people at either the Pay Centre who are focused solely on historical issues, but they're also trying to deal with the day-to-day issues. There are constant pay action requests every day, as you can imagine, with hundreds of thousands of public servants. But we do have, from my office's perspective, an audit coming out soon looking at pay modernization, and so looking at how they're doing and how they're progressing at improving things. And so hopefully that will help inform a further study for the Public Accounts Committee in a few months.
So in terms of ongoing data entry issues, you mentioned, is there some check and balance that we could recommend to find those faster and to correct them sooner?
I think there are a lot of checks and balances in place. Again, I think this would be a case where a little more follow-up and rigor might help. There are only certain departments that use the Pay Centre managed by Public Service and Procurement Canada, and the rest of the departments have their own individuals who do that entry. So it is a very widespread a responsibility. So it isn't just one department, but everyone who has to, I think, really look at the controls that they have around double checking that pay data is accurate when it's entered. Some of that could be automated, but right now a lot of it is still quite manual.
Okay. I think I got 20 seconds. Well, thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes today's meeting. I want to thank our witnesses for their testimony and participation in relation to the study of the public accounts of Canada for both 2024 and 2025. We'll meet back here Wednesday in camera for line-by-line review study. That notice will be sent out shortly. Thank you very much for everyone for coming in today. This meeting is adjourned.